Detectives found a body placed among rocks in regional Victoria. The victim was identified as Wayne Amy. His body was wedged between two large boulders where someone had tried to hide him. There were clear signs of a violent struggle, and it was immediately obvious that this was not an accidental death. For investigators, the scene started to raise urgent questions right away. The body showed signs that he had been attacked, moved, and left behind in a way that pointed to planning, fear, and desperation. But as the focus turned to who might have wanted him dead, the answers did not stay focused on Wayne alone. Because Wayne Amy was not the first man connected to this circle to disappear. Years earlier, another man had vanished with no body to be found, no location data, and no explanations. His name was George Templeton, and his disappearance in 2005 had remained unresolved for years up until that point. As police began pulling at the loose ends of Wayne's death, a shared link with the same woman between both men became impossible to ignore. How did two men connected to the same woman end up dead, and why did every evidence pointed back to her?
You are watching Crime Insider. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video.
In 2005, Robyn Lindholm was living in Melbourne and had already spent years moving through nightclubs, gyms, and private social circles connected to the city's criminal underworld. She had previously worked as a stripper, a job that placed her in regular contact with men who carried reputations for violence, money, or both. Those relationships often overlapped, and Robyn maintained multiple personal connections at the same time. Robyn was not publicly known for criminal activity herself. There were no charges and no direct police attention tied to her name. What followed her instead were relationships with men who operated on the edges of legality. She was seen as confident and socially fluent, able to move between different environments without drawing attention to herself. At the center of her life at the time was George Templeton. George ran a carpet-laying business, had 5 children, but that was only part of his life. Away from work, he was known in Melbourne's underworld and moved within a Richmond-based crew nicknamed the Plastic Gangsters. The group was tied to drug dealing, standover work, and weapons trading. People who knew him described him as intimidating and physically imposing. His reputation alone was often enough to discourage confrontation with him. At home, the relationship between Robyn and George was unstable. The two argued frequently, separated at times, and then reconciled before settling back into the same pattern. Despite this instability, they remained together, and George was openly protective of her. To outsiders, the relationship appeared petty, but most of their conflicts were contained inside their private lives. By May 2005, Robyn and George were living together. That month, George was reported missing from near his own home. There was no public explanation, no confirmed sighting, and no clear reason for him to leave behind his children, his work, and his normal routine. For someone who had once been a constant presence in his own world, the absence was immediate. On the night George Templeton disappeared, the evening appeared ordinary. He was at home, and Robyn Lindholm was there with a friend. Dinner was prepared and eaten inside the house, and the three of them spent time together in the living area before Robyn and her friend left briefly, saying they needed to step out. When Robyn and her friend returned, George was gone, and his car was gone as well. There were no obvious signs of a struggle or confrontation inside the house. George did not take any clothing or personal belongings with him, and he had not contacted anyone to explain where he went. When questions began, Robyn said George had left on his own. She told people he had gone to meet someone about business, and at other times said he had decided to go underground. The explanations were delivered calmly, and there was no indication of urgency or concern. For a short period, those explanations slowed the response around his absence. That hesitation did not last. George did not contact his children, did not access his bank accounts, and did not make arrangements for his work. His carpet-laying business stalled without him, and money that would normally have been collected was left untouched. Friends and family became unsettled because George had disappeared before, but he had never cut off contact in this way. Days passed without a word. There were no confirmed sightings, no calls, and no messages that suggested movement or planning. His absence did not fit a pattern of choice or escape, and it did not appear temporary. As concern grew, police were notified, and George Templeton was formally listed as a missing person. Not long after George Templeton disappeared, another man began occupying his place in Robyn Lindholm's life. His name was Wayne Amy. At the time, Wayne was not publicly connected to George's disappearance, but he was already known to Robyn through a side relationship that had existed alongside her relation with George. Wayne owned a gym and carried himself with visible confidence. Wayne's presence in George's life did not remain abstract. He began spending time at George's house and then began staying there. It wasn't just that Wayne moved in, it was an erasure. Wayne didn't just sleep in the missing man's bed. He drove George's prized cars, wore George's gold jewelry, and took over George's lifestyle completely. While Robyn acted like nothing had changed, despite the fact that George's body had not been located and no explanation had been confirmed. The life that once revolved around George remained intact, but Wayne now stood at the center of them. From the outside, it appeared that George's life had not ended so much as it had been reassigned. For George's children, it was a psychological nightmare, watching a stranger literally put on their missing father's life like a costume. There had been no funeral, no confirmation of death, and no clear ending, yet his absence was already being treated as permanent. Over time, the relationship between Robyn Lindholm and Wayne Amy began to fall apart. What had once looked confident and united slowly turned tense and unstable. Living close together and sharing the same space created constant pressure, and the balance between them started to break down. Arguments became more common. People around them noticed raised voices, sudden mood changes, and a growing sense of unease. Wayne became controlling, often wanting to know where Robyn was and who she was speaking to. Robyn responded by becoming more distant, keeping to herself and avoiding confrontation. The ease they once had was gone, replaced by constant suspicion. The relationship also became violent. Disagreements escalated beyond words, and fear became part of their daily life. Both appeared on edge, careful about what they said and how they acted around each other. The connection between them no longer felt like a choice, it felt like something they were stuck inside. What kept them tied together was not trust or affection, it was a shared secret surrounding George Templeton's disappearance. Each knew that walking away carried risks. Neither could leave without worrying about what the other might say or do. Their relationship was held together by silence and mutual fear rather than loyalty. As the pressure grew, Robyn began to pull away. She spent less time with Wayne and started rebuilding parts of her life without him. The distance between them widened, and whatever bond remained continued to weaken. Eventually, Robyn left Wayne. The separation did not calm things down. It increased tension and anger on both sides. With no shared space and no reason to hold back, resentment replaced restraint. After Robyn Lindholm left Wayne Amy, the situation between them became more dangerous. The relationship was over, but the problems did not stop. Wayne was angry, unpredictable, and still very much part of her life. Robyn no longer felt safe in her daily routine. Every movement, every decision came with the fear that Wayne could show up or retaliate. Robyn's thinking changed. She no longer focused on staying away from Wayne. She focused on making sure he could never hurt her again. Wayne knew too much about George Templeton's disappearance, and his behavior had already become violent. Robyn believed that as long as Wayne was alive, she would never be free from him. Instead of acting on her own, Robyn looked for other people to do the job. She began spending time with two men, Torsten Traubsch and John Ryan. Both men were short on money and easily influenced. Robyn presented Wayne as a serious threat and talked about what could happen if he was not stopped. She also spoke about money and what they would receive afterward. Robyn used attention, sex, and promises of payment to keep them involved. She made Wayne sound dangerous but careless, someone who could be caught off guard. She minimized the risks and focused on what they would gain. Over time, the conversations became plans, and the plans turned into attempts. The early attempts failed. Plans fell apart. Timing was wrong. People did not show up when they were supposed to. Each failure made the situation worse. Wayne was still alive, and the fear did not go away. Instead, the pressure increased, and the number of people involved grew. What Robin believed would bring control began creating chaos. Every failed attempt left more loose ends and more danger, and the situation moved closer to something that could not be undone. By December 2013, Wayne Amy was no longer living openly. His movements were limited, and his routine had narrowed. Robin Lindholm and the men she had drawn into her plan knew where he was staying and began watching for an opportunity. The focus settled on an apartment complex where Wayne was spending time, a place with underground parking and limited visibility. The plan was simple. Wayne would be confronted near his car, overpowered quickly, and removed before anyone noticed. On the night of the attack, Wayne entered the parking area, unaware that he was being watched. As he reached his car, he was confronted. The moment broke whatever plan had been imagined. Wayne reacted immediately, fighting back and breaking free. He ran through the garage, trying to escape on foot. What followed was chaotic. Wayne was chased through the parking area. He slipped, fell, and was caught. The struggle continued on the ground as multiple people became involved. There was shouting, movement, confusion. The situation was loud, uncontrolled, and nothing like the quiet disappearance of George Templeton years earlier. Wayne was attacked repeatedly during the struggle. He fought to get away, but the numbers were against him. The violence was fast and disorganized, driven by panic rather than precision. This was not a clean plan being carried out. It was a situation spiraling beyond control. After the attack, there was no calm resolution. Wayne's body was dragged back towards the car. He was forced into the boot while decisions were made on the fly. Nothing about the moment suggested confidence or control. It was rushed, messy, and driven by fear of being seen. The contrast could not have been sharper. George Templeton had vanished without noise, without witnesses, without a trace that made sense. Wayne Amy's death unfolded in full motion, with mistakes, desperation, and visible struggle. One disappearance had been silent, the other left behind movement, images, and people who could talk. By the time the car left the apartment complex, whatever control Robin believed she had achieved was gone. The night had produced not just a death, but a trail that could not be ignored. Wayne Amy's disappearance did not remain unresolved for long. Unlike George Templeton years earlier, this case generated immediate attention because too many details stood out. Wayne had been seen shortly before he went missing, and several people were known to have been with him in the days leading up to his disappearance. The circumstances made it clear that this was not a quiet vanishing. Police began tracing the movements of the people connected to Wayne during that period. Phone records and vehicle data showed travel away from Melbourne and into regional Victoria. The timing and distance of the trip did not match work, routine travel, or social visits. Instead, the data pointed to a deliberate journey into a remote area. That trail led investigators to Mount Korong. Mount Korong is an isolated and rocky location, made up of steep ground and large boulders. It is not an area people visit casually, especially not late at night. Search teams focused on the area after location data showed extended time spent there by the men connected to Wayne's disappearance. Wayne Amy's body was found lodged between large rocks. He had been placed into a narrow rock crevice, partially concealed by the surrounding terrain. The location suggested an effort to hide him rather than leave him exposed. The ground was uneven and difficult to move through, indicating that transporting a body there would have required planning and physical effort. The discovery removed any remaining uncertainty. An autopsy later confirmed that Wayne had suffered multiple injuries. The injuries were consistent with a prolonged physical struggle rather than a sudden event. The findings aligned with what investigators believed had taken place earlier, when Wayne was confronted and attacked near the apartment complex. The contrast between the two cases became impossible to ignore. George Templeton had vanished without leaving behind a body or a clear scene. Wayne Amy's death, by comparison, produced physical evidence that could be examined. There was a location, a body, and injuries that documented what had happened. Finding Wayne Amy's body caused everything around him to unravel. Once he was found at Mount Corong, attention moved quickly to the men who had been with him before his death. Torsten Trabge and John Ryan were taken in, and the pressure on both of them increased fast. The confidence they had shown earlier did not last once they were separated and questioned. What followed was confusion and blame. Each man tried to explain his own role while placing responsibility on the other. Their accounts did not line up, and as they spoke, more information came out than either of them likely intended. In trying to protect themselves, they began talking about conversations, planning, and how they had been drawn into the situation. Robin Lindholm's name came up repeatedly as they described how the idea had formed and who had pushed it forward. As these accounts were compared, a larger picture started to form. Robin was not only connected to Wayne Amy's death, she had also been present at the center of George Templeton's life when he disappeared years earlier. The connection was no longer easy to dismiss. The same person appeared in both stories, linked to both men at critical moments. With Wayne's death now exposed, attention returned to 2005. People began re-examining what had once been treated as unanswered but isolated. The long silence around George Templeton no longer looked like chance or confusion. It began to look deliberate, supported by behavior that now had context. Wayne Amy continued to play a role even after his death. Several people said Wayne had talked openly about George in the past. He had spoken as if he knew more than he should and acted as if nothing could touch him. At the time, those comments were brushed off as exaggeration. Now, they pointed back to George's disappearance and helped explain why Wayne had felt untouchable for so long. What started as an effort to understand Wayne Amy's death ended up reopening an older wound. Solving the second crime brought clarity to the first. George Templeton's disappearance was no longer standing alone. It was connected by people, by shared knowledge, and by the same woman at the center of both events. One collapse set off another, and the past finally caught up. After Wayne Amy's body was found, Robin Lindholm and Torsten Trabge did not stay put. They left their usual routines and started staying in different areas, avoiding places where they were known. Their behavior changed quickly from routine to evasion, and it became clear they were trying to stay out of reach. Police searched for them for days, and eventually they were tracked to a concrete stormwater drain. Instead of coming out, both climbed down into the channel and hid in the water. The drain was partially flooded, and they remained there for hours, pressed against the concrete as police searched the surrounding area. They did not attempt to run again once they were located. When they were brought out, Robin was soaked from head to toe. Her clothes and hair were wet from the water in the drain. By the time Robin Lindholm appeared in court, the story around her had changed completely. She was no longer a woman moving quietly through other people's lives. She was now the center of two separate murder cases. The first trial focused on the death of Wayne Amy, the man she had once lived with and later turned against. The court heard how the plan had been put together, how other people had been drawn in, and how Wayne's death unfolded after weeks of failed attempts. When the case concluded, Robin was convicted of arranging his killing. What stood out to many people during the trial was not only the evidence, but Robin herself. She appeared calm and controlled in the courtroom. She paid close attention to her appearance, often dressed neatly and carefully, as if presentation still mattered. There were no visible signs of regret, no emotional reactions that suggested shock or shame. She listened, watched, and waited as if detached from what was being said about her. After the first conviction, attention shifted to a much older case. George Templeton's disappearance from 2005, which had lingered without answers for years, was brought back into focus. This second trial examined Robin's role in George's life and the events surrounding the night he vanished. The court heard how George had disappeared without warning and how Robin's explanations at the time had failed to match what followed. The silence that once protected the case was now filled with testimony. Once again, Robin maintained the same outward composure. She did not react visibly as George's name was spoken or as his family listened from the courtroom. The contrast between her calm presence and the weight of what was being discussed did not go unnoticed. When the verdicts were delivered, the outcome was clear. Robin Lindholm was found guilty. After the trials ended, Robin Lindholm was sentenced to prison terms for both murders. In 2015, she was sentenced to 25 years for arranging Wayne Amey's death, with a non-parole period of 21 years. In 2019, she was sentenced to 28 years for the murder of George Templeton. The judge ordered that part of the second sentence be served at the same time as the first, and part of it be added after. When both cases were combined, it meant Robin Lindholm could not apply for parole for 30 years. The woman who had once moved between relationships and situations without consequence was now held accountable for both deaths. The courtroom chapter of the story closed with finality, leaving no doubt about responsibility, even if many questions had taken years to reach the surface. In the end, the two men at the center of this story were separated not just by time, but how they were left behind. Wayne Amey was found in the rocks at Mount Corong, his body wedged into the ground where it was eventually discovered. George Templeton, by contrast, was never recovered. His body was never found, and the place where he was taken was never identified. That difference mattered. Wayne's death produced physical proof, including a location, a body, and injuries that documented violence. George's disappearance produced silence. His family did not receive remains to bury, did not have a confirmed place of death, and did not receive answers that felt complete. One case closed with evidence, the other closed with absence. Over time, a clear pattern emerged. Robin Lindholm moved through relationships with control and intent. Men served specific purposes in her life, and when those purposes ended or became dangerous, she did not withdraw, she took steps to remove them. The legal process came to an end, but the impact of the case did not. Some saw accountability, others saw years of silence, fear, and damage that could never be undone. The question was not only who was punished, but whether anything truly balanced what had been lost. Do you think justice was served in this case, or did it arrive too late to matter? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you found this story important, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more true crime documentaries.